Hello everyone, welcome. We are in nature. I've got Leah here and we are going to read the George MacDonald book. We're going to continue with Sir Gibbie. And I just welcome. I brought this headset so we can just set this and watch nature happen around us during it. And George MacDonald was one of C.S. Lewis's. It was his spiritual mentor. So he taught him all about real truth of what the real spiritual path is. You know, Lewis was an atheist and Tolkien helped him come back to Christ. But he had been reading George MacDonald and he found like this wonder and mystery and just a depth of richness. And George MacDonald was just so like this. It's conveyed in his stories. So we can enter in and it transforms our life. You know, we don't look for these outcomes. We just are present with it. And when someone of that depth and richness writes for us, it gets transferred to us in the story. That's why I'm reading these. It's, you know, people think, why are you reading like kids' books? It's from the 1800s, so it's free copyright. So I love that as well. Like, it's good when my mentors are free copyright because then I feel like I have all the freedom to just read it for us. But I was gonna, a lot of these, I think all of them, I was gonna just read them myself. And because I'm so used to, like, God led me on this path to make videos, I just said, I'm gonna share this so that we all get it. You know, why not? I don't have to just, and like, how awesome is it? I saw this elderly Asian woman on my way here that had this thermos again of her tea. And I was like, oh, I forgot again. It's such a good idea to sit here and have a cup of tea while we read a story, you know. I want to just make the time to just even do that at home. I watched this video the other day and this guy was just making these china cups, these beautiful blue teacups. And it was like, okay, let's pack up everything, or pack up nothing, actually. Sell everything, move there, and just make teacups 4 days a week and have enough to live, you know. It just made everything look so simple. Anyway, that's just a dream, right? But, excuse me, can be a reality. It could be. Why not? Who says so? Who says I can't have an Oompa Loompa? No, kidding. He's like the man with the funny hat. Oh, that's from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. All right, hopefully, let me see if, I might lower that a little bit. All right, just because there's people behind me that take pictures. I don't want my camera to be in there. Hi, Leia. Thank you for the kisses, girl. All right. All right. Okay, so what I do, just so you know, if you're first time here, then just come along for the story where it is. I encourage you to just trust it, you know, and I know that God is having me do this for you, for other people, or I wouldn't be doing it. So I'm just being obedient, and that means this is for you. You know, ask God, and we ask you right now, God, enlighten us, teach us what you want to teach us through this, or just help us to take some time out of our day to enter into a story. And so I do this to show if people are fast forwarding when I'm actually starting the book, if I talk a little at the beginning. All right, and so we are on a new chapter. That's always nice when we don't have to stop in the middle. This is chapter 30, the Lorry Meadow. Oh, okay. And so it was high time, according to the agricultural economics, that Donald Grant should be prompted a step in the ranks of labor. Oh, promoted. That makes more sense. He's going to be promoted because he's been watching the cows and he studies all the time. I mean, I've read the book, so I know what's coming sometimes. But what is it, Leah? All right. Promoted a step in the ranks of labor. A youth like him was fit for horses and their work and looked idle in a field with cattle. But Donald was not ambitious, at least in that direction. He was more and more in love with books and learning and the music of thought and word, and he knew well that no one doing a man's work upon a farm could have much time left for study, certainly not a quarter of what the herd boy could command. So he would have to watch the cows, but he had all this time to sit and read his books and then just look up and make sure they're in the, they're in the fence. Like someone had to watch over them, but it wasn't, you're always rounding up things on horses and stuff like that back then. It was the 1800s on a farm, All right. So, certainly not a quarter of what the herd boy could command. Therefore, with his parents' approval, he continued to fill the humbler office and receive the scantier wages belonging to it. The day following their adventure on Glashgar, in the afternoon, Nicey, being in the grounds with her little mistress, so Nicey is Donald's sister, and you'll see Sir Gibbie was adopted by Donald's parents. He's like a foundling. He didn't have, his mother and father both died. His dad died of alcoholism anyway, and so he was out walking about in the country for God's purposes, he didn't know why, but you'll see. And so he met this family, and they took him in. They're so sweet. They took him in, and anyway, so loving. But anyway, the day following their adventure on Glashgar, in the afternoon, Nicey, being in the grounds with her little mistress, proposed that they should look whether they could see her brother down in the meadow of which her mother had spoken. So Ginevra willingly agreed, and they took their way through the shrubbery to a certain tall hedge, which divided the grounds from a little grove of larches on the slope of a steep bank descending to the Lorrie, on the other side of which lay the meadow. It was a hawthorn hedge, very old, and near the ground very thin, so that they easily found a place to creep through. But they were no better on the other side, for the larches hid the meadow. They went down through them, therefore, to the bank of the little river, the largest tributary of the Dower from the roots of Glashgar. There he is, cried Nicey. I see him, responded Ginny, with his cows all about the meadow. Donald sat a little way from the river, reading. He's at a book, says Nicey. Oh, see, I was like, I listened to part of it ahead of time last time on my way back, so I could... okay, if you watched the last video, if you didn't look down in the comments, I wrote all the conversations out for us in the comments. I didn't know there were going to be all these the Scottish broke kind of conversations, and I could not understand all of what was going on. And so I went back and I read it in the translated book, because there's a man that knows and translated it, and then I wrote it in the pinned comments. So look there if I ever do that. And sometimes I show the book so that you can translate it for us, do the work, if you'd like to participate and contribute. Because I don't always have time, but I want to be excellent at everything that I do. So I want us to know. It's so fun just staring at the ocean, but I like looking at the wind blowing in these bushes too. And sometimes it's fun to have a person's face in the camera. Anyway, I'll read like this for a few minutes. I don't know how long. All right, so I wonder what book it is, said Ginny. That would be ill to say, Nicey. Donald reads a handful of books. His mother says, nor she doubts he's well the guide of. Anyway, do you think it's Latin, Nicey? Oh, I dare say, but no, it cannot be Latin, for look, he's laughing, and he couldn't do that if it was Latin. I'm thinking it'll be a story. There's a heap of them printed now, they tell me. Or, deed, maybe it may be a song. He thinks a heap of songs, like he reads poetry, right? I heard my mother once say she was some fear Donald might take into making songs himself. Not that there was any ill of that, she said, given that there was only ill in the song, only if there's ill in the songs themselves, right? But it was just like some trifling book, she says. I'm just translating what she's saying. And look for, better for Donald with his books. He learns like Euclid, or what can they, if it's not making songs. What's Euclid, Nicey? You may well speak, Missy, but I have ill to tell you. I don't know. Like she's saying, I don't know. It's a curious name for a book, and I don't know anything about it. Something about your itches. Anyway, what lies between the two covers, right? I think she's saying the two covers of a book. I don't know. I don't know more than the man in the moon. Anyway, I should like to ask Donald what book he's got, said Ginny. I'll cry to him and you can speak, said Nicey. Donald, Donald, and Donald looked up. It just says, Donald looked up. Seeing his sister, came running to the bank of the stream. Canny you come over, Donald, said Nicey. Here's Miss Galbraith wants to spare you a question. Donald was across in a moment, for here the water was nowhere over a foot or two in depth. Oh, Donald, you wet your feet, cried Ginevra. Donald laughed. What ill does he mean? Anyway, she's saying, none, I hope, said Ginny. But it might, I might be drowned, said Donald. Anyway, he's teasing. Nicey, said Ginny with dignity. Your brother is laughing at me. No, ma'am, said Donald apologetically. Donald, I was only so glad to see you and Nicey, I forgot my manners. Then, returned Ginny, quite satisfied, would you mind telling me what book you were reading? It's a book of ballads, answered Donald. I'll read one of them to you, if you'd like, ma'am. I should like very much, responded Ginny. I've read all my own books till I'm tired of them, and I don't like Papa's books. And do you know, Donald, here the child woman's voice grew solemn, sad. I'm very sorry, and I'm frightened to say it. If you weren't Nicey's brother, I couldn't say it to you, but I'm very tired of the Bible, too. That's a pity, ma'am, replied Donald. I would have you not tell anybody that, for them that likes a hair better than themselves. They'll think you're a heathen for saying it if you just tell anybody that, right? Just go on up to my mother and tell her about it. She says she's very fair to anybody and never thinks ill of anybody who says the truth when it's not for contrariness, right? She's just saying how she's experiencing it. And she says a heap come out of folk when they speak out what they know or what they're thinking, but guessing at what they don't know and what other folks are thinking, instead of guessing what other people know and what they're thinking. Anyway, I got to put my sweatshirt on. It's getting cold and rainy. All right, and so her Janet she meditates on the scriptures, his mom, and she won't judge her for any way she's seen it. Like, people could have been teaching Ginny quite poorly about the real essence and truth of it. And Gibbie has been up on the mountain learning from Janet just because that's her daily practice, to meditate and pray and read the scripture. And so she was teaching Donald already knows that's her son, but she's teaching, oh, look, XO. When I see XO, it just reminds me, die to yourself and go into this oneness of God. This God loves us, and in him we live and move and have our being. Yeah, it's still me, Leah. All right, and so let me get Leah some water, and I'll talk to you a little bit about Jenny for a second. Ginevra, they call her Jenny. Here you go, honey. Here you go. Hold on. Good girl. Hold on. Yeah, she likes drinking it when it's coming out. Okay, I brought water for her. Good girl. Okay, we'll go back to hot it up. Okay, watch out, Leah. I just feel so happy today. It's like, for other people, yesterday would have probably been like the worst day of their life, but I'm just feel like so released of everything because I had to surrender everything to God. I don't know if you've had those days, but I had to move this because Leah's leash is gonna... All right, that's a pretty picture. Okay. So she found out he's not making fun of her and he's going to read her a ballad. And so I should like very much, responded Jenny. I've read, okay, so anyway, she's telling him about this. And so instead of guessing at what they don't know and what other folks are thinking, said Nicey, it would be a good changed word given folk go to my mother. And she would have, she would know that. She would help them. She'd help them. She says folks should never tell, but ill they know of themselves and the good they know of other folk. And that's just the contrary ye can, missy, when folk mostly disdee. I don't know what she's saying at all here, so either I'll go back or I don't know if I'll have time today, but someone can remind me in the comments. Anyway, it's chapter 30, so I can look it up, or you can guess. That's why I did that, so you can look at it and, oh, I used cinematic last time. It was all cinematic last time. I accidentally pushed the wrong button and then I just kept recording. And I was like, whatever. It was really cool. Anyway, let's stay in the story in case you're just here, and want the rhythm of the story to go on. All right. A pause naturally followed, which Jenny broke. I don't think you told me the name of the book you were reading, Donald, she says. Gin you would sit down a minute, ma'am, returned Donald. Here's a bonny Gowani spot. I don't know what Gowani is, whatever. I would read a little bit to you and whoa, see again. Oh, the dog hit this. I think, and his sister, right? And see again. Let's see. If you like it, before I tell you the name of it. So he's going to have you listen before he tells you the name of it. She dropped at once on the little Gowani bed, like heather bed, right? Like a bunch of heather, I don't know. Gathered her frock about her ankles and said, sit down, Nicey. It's so kind of Donald to read something for us. I wonder what it's going to be. She uttered everything in a deliberate, old-fashioned way, with precise articulation and a certain manner that an English mother would have called priggish, but which was only the outcome of Scottish stiffness, her father's rebukes, and her own sense of propriety. So this is how she learned, because her mother's not been around, just like C.S. Lewis's wasn't. Anyway, Donald read the ballad of Kemp Owen. Oh, I want to look it up. I always want to look it up, and I haven't. I don't think I understand it, said Ginevra. It's very dreadful, and I don't know. Hold on. There's an ant on me, but I don't know what to think. Tell me about it, Donald. Do you know what it means, Nicey? No, not a glimp, missy. Not a glimp, missy. Right. She's not as educated as, sorry, her name is Nicey. After Eunices, Timothy's grandmother in the Bible. They said it earlier in the story, that's all. Anyway, so, not a glimp, missy, answered Nicey. Donald proceeded at once to an exposition. He told them that the serpent lady, enchanted by a wicked witch, who after she had changed her, twisted her 3 times round the tree, so that she could not undo herself, and laid the spell upon her that she should never have the shape of a woman until a knight kissed her as often as she was twisted round the tree. Oh, the good knight has to kiss her 3 times. Oh wow, I'm just getting all these insights about life. Anyway, then when the night did come, at every kiss a coil of her body unwound itself until at the last kiss she stood before him, the beautiful lady she really was. Ah, what a good, kind, brave knight, said Ginevra. But it's no true, missy, said Nicey, anxious that she should not be misled. It's nothing but Donald's nonsense. Nonsense here, nonsense there, said Donald. I see a heap of sense in it, into it. But nonsense or no, Nicey, it's none of my own nonsense. I wish it were. He wish it was his. He wish he wrote such a classic piece as the story. It's hundreds of years old, that ballad. I would warrant, that it is. All right. I hope you're doing well in your life. I highly recommend surrendering everything to the Creator and trusting that God is good and good will come from it. I don't know any other way to live, but sometimes you have to have everything stripped from you to get to that place. But look, we still have a dog. We still have this little dog with us. She's so cute. Anyway, and we have this wonderful, amazing, transformative book that's just, anyway. And we have this breeze, and there's kids playing at a playground right now. I hear them playing. This is their view. Isn't that awesome if your recess was out here? Oh, I just want to sing. I don't know what. It's beautiful, said Ginevra, with decision and dignity. I hope he married the lady and they lived happily ever after. I hope so too. I don't know, ma'am. The man that made the ballot, I dare say, thought him well paid the gin bonny lady, and said thank you to him. I'm sure she said thank you, right? Oh, but Donald, that wouldn't be enough, would it, Nicey? Well, you see, missy, answered Nicey, he but gave her 3 kisses. That wasn't so muckle to were. It says to lay out upon a body. I don't know. It just doesn't put you in debt, I guess, right? But a serpent's mouth, Nicey. Here, unhappily, Donald had to rush through the burn without leave-taking, for Horn, I call him Horn, it's because, anyway, the cow, was attempting a trespass, and the 2 girls, thinking it was time to go home, rose and climbed to the house at their leisure. The rest of the day, Ginevra talked of little else than the serpent lady and the brave knight, saying now and then, what a nice boy that Donald of Nicey's was. Nor was more than the gentlest hint necessary to make Nicey remark the next morning that perhaps, if they went down again to the Lorry, Donald might come and bring the book. But when they reached the bank and looked across, they saw him occupied with Gibbie. I love Gibbie, right? This is the story. It's about Sir Gibbie, right? They had their heads close together over a slate, upon which now the one, now the other, seemed to be drawing. Okay, don't be afraid for me, but last time I pulled a tick off of myself when I got home, and I was like, oh, wait, I don't want any ticks. But I think what someone says where God guides, he provides. Like, he'll make you aware of such things, you know. We hope and we pray that when you're yielded, like, you know, Jesus said it in Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, his right way of being loving. Then all these other things will just be added to you as well. So, like, let them go. It looks like a Van Gogh painting again or behind me. It always does to me, I guess, because I'm always looking at one. All right. So they were looking at this slate. I'm not at all trying to alienate anyone. I welcome all people of all faiths here. Hopefully that's not too high. It's just on a rock and my tripod, sorry. Okay. I'm gonna lower it some. All right. Occupied with Gibbie, they had their heads close together over a slate upon which now and then, now the other seemed to be drawing. This went on, and they never looked up. Ginny would have gone home and come again in the afternoon, but Nicey instantly called, Donald! He sprang to his feet and came to them, followed by Gibbie. Donald crossed the burn, but Gibbie remained on the other side, and when presently Donald took his book of ballads from his pocket, and the little company seated themselves, stood with his back to them and his eye on the knout. I don't know what the knout is. That morning they were not interrupted. That's good. Donald read to them for a whole hour concerning which reading and Ginevra's reception of it. Nicey declared she could not see what for they made such a work about all these old ballads. Like, why are they making such a work of it? Something like that, right? After another, they're not half so bonny as the paraphrases, Donald, she said. Like, she likes them when it's explained to them, or like Cliff's Notes or whatever it's called now. After this, Ginevra went frequently with Nicey to see her mother and learned much of the best from her. Often also they went down to the Lorry and had an interview with Donald, which was longer or shorter as Gibbie was there or not to release him, because Gibbie could watch the cows while he taught them or just read to them or whatever. Ginny's life was now far happier than it had ever been. Now channels of thought and feeling were opened, new questions were started, new interest awaked, so that instead of losing by Miss Macar's continued inability to teach her, that was her tutor that taught her very dryly and not the real Word of God, and some of the other stories, yes, like some other education, yes, but anyway, she was taking care of her elderly father, Miss Macar was, so her continued inability to teach her, she was learning far more than she could give her, learning it too with the pleasure which invariably accompanies true learning, right? Little more than child as she was, Donald felt from the first the charm of her society, and she by no means received without giving, for his mental development was greatly expedited thereby. Few weeks passed before he was her humble squire, devoted to her with all the chivalry of a youth, for a girl whom he supposes as much his superior in kind as she is in worldly position. Like, he thinks she's of higher kind than him, but she thinks of herself as unworthy and not a good person. Maybe she's starting to know that God can make all of us good, right? We started good in God. Anyway, and she by no means received without giving, for his mental development was greatly expedited thereby. A few weeks passed before he was her humble squire, devoted to her with all the chivalry of a youth, for a girl who, I already read this, superior in kind as she was in worldly position, because her father owned the farmland, and the guy was renting it for his cows and stuff. But anyway, he was a laird of the land. Anyway, it's raining. I don't want my book to get wet, but we'll have to dry it out maybe when I get home. His sole advantage in his own judgment, and that which alone procured him the privilege of her society, being that he was older and therefore knew a little more. So potent and genial was her influence on his imagination that without once thinking of her as their object, he now first found himself capable of making verses, such as they were, and one day, with his book before him, it was Burns, and he had been reading the Gowan poem to Ginevra and his sister, he ventured to repeat, as if he read them from the book, the following. They halted a little, no doubt, in rhythm. Neither were perfectly rhymed, but for a beginning they had promise. Gibbie, who had thrown himself down on the other bank and lay listening, at once detected the change in the tone of his utterance, and before he ceased had concluded that he was not reading them, but that they were his own. He was reciting his own poetry to them, right? I'll do my best. Wren, Barney, clatter, to the sea win. Gin, I was a water, said what I rin. Blow, wind, collar, clean, here, and high and away, high and away. Again I was a wind. It's like I'm wishing I was a wind. Would I blow? Shine, old sun, shine strange and fine. Wish I was the sun's sun. Hearty I would shine. Hold on. I think that's it. I'll show you it so you can read it if you want. Because I was taught you read a poem aloud 3 times for you to get it. To begin to get it at least. But I'll let you do that. You can rewind it or read it. Hardly had he ended when Gibbie's pipes began from the opposite side of the water, and true to time and cadence and feeling, followed with just the one air to suit the song, from which Donald, to his no small comfort, understood that one at least of his audience had received his lilt, his poetry for them. I'm seeing if I have anything warmer, because, I do have another shirt, but I don't want to. Here, I'll just put it on my lap. I didn't know it was going to rain. I didn't look ahead of time. I just came out here. I've got to walk the whole way back. Whatever. I've got a hat now. I didn't know I had a hat. And Leia's all cozy up to me right now. Leia, just stay. It's all cozy with you on my back. She's leaning against my back. Good girl, good girl. Just stay, honey. We're not going yet. We're not going yet. You can go back around the other way if you're twisted up. Good girl. Oh, you want your water? Okay, hold on, hold on. You want some? Yeah, she wanted some. All right. Okay, so if the poorest nature in the world responds with the tune to the mightiest master's song, he knows, if not another echo should come back, that he has uttered a true cry, right? But Ginevra had not received it, and being therefore of her own mind and not of the songs, was critical. Okay, so she was in her own mind instead of entering into the song, you know? We leave this criticalness and enter in. That one is nonsense, Donald, she says. Isn't it now? How could a man be a burn? A burn is the river, right? How could a man be a river? Or the sun's sun, the S-U-N, S-O-N, right? She's saying, how could we be that? How could a man be a burn or a wind or the sun? But poets are silly. Papa says so. So she's just saying it because her father doesn't enter into the mysterious and taught her wrongly to not enter it and to scorn it. In his mind, Donald did not know which way to look. Physically, he regarded the ground. Happily, at that very moment, Horn caused a diversion, and Gibbie understood what Donald was feeling too well to make even a pretense of going after her, after that cow that gets into all the trouble, right? I must, to his praise, record the fact that instead of wreaking his mortification upon the cow, Donald spared her several blows out of gratitude for the deliverance her misbehavior had brought him, you know, Saved by the Bell. He got to leave being embarrassed because that was his own poetry. But anyway, I'll keep reading the story. He was in no haste to return to his audience. To have his first poem thus rejected was killing. She was but a child who had so unkindly criticized it, but she was the child he wanted to please, and for a few moments life itself seemed scarcely worth having, right, in that moment. He called himself a fool and resolved never to read another poem to a girl so long as he lived. Don't make that resolution, right? We wouldn't have all those songs, you know. By the time he had again walked through the burn, the river, right, the little rivulet, however, he was calm and comparatively wise and knew what to say. Do you hear yon burn after you go to your bed, ma'am? You know, do you hear the river flowing and singing, you know, because it's right outside our house? He asked Ginevra as he climbed the bank, pointing a little lower down the stream to the mountain brook which joined it. Always, she answered. It runs right under my window. Oh, what do you know of what do you know of the sound that it makes? Like, what do you know? What is it speaking? I'm translating again. He asked again. It's different at different times, she answered. It sings and chatters in summer and growls and cries and grumbles in winter, or after rain up in Glashgar. Do you think the burn's only happier in the summer, ma'am? No, Donald. The burn has no life in it, and therefore can't be happier one time than another. Well, ma'am, I would just like to show you what it is to fancy yourself a burn. If you fancied yourself a river, if you imagined yourself to be a river, then to fancy the burn a body, and over time singing and chatting, and then sometimes growling and grumbling. Well, but Donald, can a man be a burn? Can we be a river, right? Well, ma'am, no, at least not in this world as it is, as it's made, but then when you're laying, hearkening to listening to the burn when you're in your bed, right? Did you never imagine yourself running down with it, down to the sea? No, Donald, I always fancy myself going up to the mountain where it comes from and running about wild there in the wind, when all the time I know I'm safe and warm in bed. Oh, I have an electric blanket. Maybe I'll go home and make tea and sit under that. Wow, I hope I make some time today more than this. This is such a pleasure. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you're enjoying this with me. But, it's an invitation. I put it out there and we'll see what happens. Anyway, always, you feel free to like any of my videos, because it does help. It helps the algorithm indirectly, because other people think, oh, this is worth watching. And then maybe they'll look and see and enter into this bliss, this paradise that we have. Almost paradise. I'm knocking on heaven's door. How could we ask for more? I swear that I could see forever in your eyes. Paradise. Look at my shirt. I showed it in this video I was making on the way up here. It says always and forever. I thought that love was hard to find. Each time I got close. That's a song from the original Footloose soundtrack. Anyway, but always and forever love. That's the love God has for us always. All right, so he's saying, so she says, and then I know I'm safe and warm in bed. Well, maybe that's better yet. I wouldn't say, answered Donald, but just this night for a change, if you like. Go down with it for your thoughts. Just listen and hearken hearty until the night, and when you're in your bed, and listen to the sound rises away with you and you forget about yourself, and think yourself away with the burn, with the river, running, through this way and through that, through stains and bricks and bracken, birks and bracken, not bricks, whatever bricks and bracken is, through heather and pool land and corn and woods and gardens, I singing and changing your tune according, till it winds to the muckle roaring sea. As it goes, anyway, in the first night, and the wind's up in the air, do the same, ma'am, with the wind. Get up upon the back of it, and act like it was your muckle horse. I don't know what muckle is. Muckle horse, right? Your own horse. And just ride him to the death. Death. I don't know. I think that's what he's saying. I'll show you it so you can read it yourself. It's this part. And anyway, after you go, and then you'll know what it's like to be like the man of the wind, the woman of the wind, right? And maybe you just were just like at the burn, or a blow in the wind, or would be Sir Loss of the Universe, if you know. I'm thinking you could be ready to find, you wouldn't be so ready. He's like, you wouldn't be so ready to find fault with the child that made that yawn bit songy. Right, made the poem. Are you vexed with me, Donald? I'm so sorry, said Ginevra, taking the earnestness of his tone for displeasure. Nah, ma'am. You're over good and over bonny, answered Donald, to be vexed to anybody. She's like, you're so good and so pretty. Like, I couldn't be vexed with you for long, right? That would be like speaking like one of the fools of the world, to stay vexed with you, right? I wish everyone thought like that. But it would be a vex to hear such a creature as you speaking like one of the fools of the world, that believes nothing but what comes out of the holes in their head, So God says, let the foolish things of this world confound the wise, when we can see ourselves like one of these birds. Or like I was saying, the wind blowing through these bushes. I love just watching that. Like if you slow motion this, but then you'll hear my voice all funny, but I love it. It's like the essence of us. I still have my nails done like this. I get these sparkly sparkles to remind us that we're soul essence in this body, right? George MacDonald said that. Don't teach your kids they have a soul. Teach them they are a soul and they have a body. But Some people get mad at that, but whatever. They can just sit here and listen to all this whole story, and then they'll stop getting mad, maybe, if they enter in. Anyway, so you're so Bonnie, I don't want to hear, but it's important not to speak like that. It's sad, anyway. Ginevra was silent. She could not quite understand Donald, but she felt she must be wrong somehow, and of this she was the more convinced when she saw the beautiful eyes of Gibbie fixed in admiration and brimful of love upon Donald, because he knew he wrote that poem. And it was talking about such true things in this world, such beautiful, like the sea and the wind, all of God's unmixed creation, which we were at one time. And he'll make us new. He'll make us new. He does. He takes all our sins. Anyway, the way Donald kept his vow never to read another poem of his own to a girl was to proceed that very night to make another for the express purpose. He made another that night for a girl, right? As he lay awake in the darkness. The last one he ever read to her in that meadow was this. What gars ye sing, and said the herd laddie, what gars ye sing, say aloud, to tice them out of the yard, laddie, the worms for my daily food. I, he sang, and better he sang, and the worms crept in at aught. And an he took, and twa he loot gang, but still he caroled stoot. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading it if there's more, but I'll show you it so that you can read this. Oh wow, there's a lot more. Here, I'll show you this before I go on, but keep the rhythm in your mind in case you want to read it yourself and understand it more. Because he's doing the Scottish, so I'm just doing my best to give words to it, because some people here speak different languages, so the closed caption won't work unless I say normal words. It's not for the worms, sir, said the herd. They're coming here for your song. Thank ye. Do you think ye, said sir, answered the bird. Maybe you're not in the wrong, but I and see. I don't know what and see is. Do you see it? I don't know what that means. I and see. Sing ye sorrow to beguile, or to get old fear the flegs. Nor quote the mavis is but to while. May we things out her eggs, and I and see. The mistress is plenty for that same gear, though she sing in ear nor late. It's to draw the dead fray, the diad fray, the mole say drear, and upon the kirkyard gate. The kirkyard is the churchyard. All right, the kirk is church, I know that much. Nah, it's better saying nor your own, though you have notes a feck, and would make a bare banes, there say fain, as to lift the muckle's neck, but I and see, better ye sing nor a burn o' the mune, nor a wave o'er the sand that flows, nor a wind with the glint and stars abounding, I think, right? As underneath the roses in rows, I and see. But I'll spare ye no more, sir, said the herd. I fear what ye might say next. Ye would but wonder, the mare, says the bird, to see the thoughts in my breast, like in his heart, right? And I, he sang, and better he sang, and the worms creepit in and out, and on he took, and twas he loot gang, he went, but still he caroled stood, he choraled stood or something. Watch, you can see this and read it. Okay. I doubt whether Ginevra understood this song better than the first, but she was now more careful of criticizing, And when by degrees it dawned upon her that he was the maker of these and other verses he read, she grew half afraid of Donald and began to regard him with big eyes. He became from a herd boy an unintelligible person, therefore a wonder. Hold on. When I get teary-eyed, my nose starts running. I don't want that on a camera. All right, Leia, look how cute she is. Lele. She's listening. All right, I'll show the ocean. All right, so for brought thus face to face with the maker of verses, she could not help trying to think how he did the thing, and as she felt no possibility of making verses herself, it remained a mystery and an astonishment, causing a great respect for the poet to mingle with the kindness she felt toward Nicey's brother. Chapter 31. Their Reward. In degrees, Gibbie had come to be well known about the Mains and Glashruach. Angus's only recognition of him was a scowl in return for his smile, but as I have said, he gave him no farther annoyance, and the tales about the beast loon were dying out from Daurside. Jean Mavor was a special friend to him, for she knew now well enough who had been her brownie, and made him welcome as often as he showed himself with Donald. She knows, because he had been doing all her work morning after morning, for months, I think, right? Helping her out. And they thought it was like a fairy or something. They call it a brownie, because they didn't know who was doing it, because he would climb in from the rafters, because he was sleeping in the barn. It was so awesome. That's earlier in the story, if you didn't get it. Anyway, she would, I'm sure she'd give him biscuits and stuff. Fergus was sometimes at home, sometimes away. His dad owns this. Well, he owns all the cattle and stuff. What are you eating, Lele? Come here. I'll give you food at home. All right. So Fergus was off at school, sometimes away, but he was now quite a fine gentleman, a student of theology, and only condescendingly cognizant of the existence of Donald Grant. What is it, Leia? Shh. Hi. Leia. Shh. Shh. Sorry, she scared me. I got the chills all the way. What is it, Leia? It's probably just a person up the hill. Leia. Sorry, y'all. That scared me. I mean, I hope it's not a coyote or anything. They're usually not out during the day. But I'll face this way. Leia, shh, 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 shh. I think it's just dogs up there. So he studied theology, okay, but he was horribly rude and didn't know how to love people, but we'll find that out, whatever. He's on his own journey, Fergus, right? Okay, so I know I'm just in a weird angle of the camera, but look at the clouds. It's like sunny and rainy at the same time. Anyway, I'm glad I brought my headphones, so then I don't have to have the camera so close. So he became a quite fine gentleman, student of theology, and only condescendingly cognizant of the existence of Donald Grant. All he said to him when he came home, a master of arts, was that he had expected better of him. He ought to be something more than heard by this time. Donald smiled and said nothing. He had just finished a little song that pleased him, and could afford to be patronized. I am afraid, however, he was not contented with that, but in his mind's eye measured Fergus from top to toe. In the autumn, Mr. Galbraith returned to Glashruach, but he did not remain long. That's Ginevra's dad. His schemes were promising well. He had all these schemes to rip people off of money, sadly. Anyway, they were called speculations back then. But he knew better, but he was being schemed by someone else, which would happen. Anyway. So see, Fergus is just judging by this external appearance. His schemes were promising well, and his self-importance was screwed yet a little higher in consequence. But he was kinder than usual to Ginevra. Before he went, he said to her that, as Miss Makar had sunk into a condition requiring his daughter's constant attention, he would find her an English governess as soon as he reached London. Meantime, she must keep up her studies by herself as well as she could. Probably he forgot all about it, for the governess was not heard of at Glashruach, and the things fell into their old way. There was no spiritual traffic between the father and daughter. Consequently, Ginevra never said anything about Donald or Gibbie or her friendship for Nicey. He had himself to blame altogether. He had made it impossible for her to talk to him. But it was well he remained in ignorance, and so did not put a stop to the best education she could at this time of her life have been having, such as neither he nor any friend of his could have given her. It was interrupted, however, by the arrival of the winter, a wild time in that region, fierce storm alternating with the calm of death. After howling nights in which it seemed as if all the poltergeister of the universe must be out on a disembodied lark, the mountains stood there in the morning solemn still, each with his white turban of snow. Wow. I can just imagine in the north of Scotland. I've been there before, right? Just like once or twice. Unrumpled on his head in the profoundest silence of blue air, as if he had never in his life passed a more thoughtful, peaceful time than the very last night of all. To such feet as Ginevra's, the cottage on Glashgar was for months almost as inaccessible as if it had been in Sirius, right? Some other planet or system. More than once the dower was frozen thick. For weeks every beast was an absolute prisoner to the byre, and for months was fed with straw and turnips and potatoes and oil cake. Then was the time for stories, and often in the long dark, yet it was hours too early for bed, would Ginevra go with Nicey, who was not that much of a raconteuse, to the kitchen, to get one of the other servants to tell her an old tale, for even in his own daughter and his own kitchen, the great laird could not extinguish the accursed superstition. So did not like superstition, but George MacDonald made such a great exposition of this, saying like he had all this superstition in his own mind by the demons or whatever you want to call it, the horrible thoughts he was entertaining by taking advantage of other people's money. God help us. God help. Anyway. Just, when you just pray that God works everything out for good. Teach us this narrow path. And so, anyway, so not a glimpse did Ginevra get all this time of Donald or of Gibbie. At last, like one of its own flowers in its own bosom, the spring began again to wake in God's thought of his world, and the snow, like all other deaths, had to melt and run, leaving room for hope. Then the summer woke smiling, as if she knew she had been asleep, and the two youths and the two maidens met yet again on the Lorrie's bank, with the brown water falling over the stones and the gold nuggets of the broom hanging over the water. All this straw that looks like a broom. And the young larkwood scenting the air all up of the brae side between them and the house, which the tall hedge hid from their view. The four were a year older, a year nearer trouble, and a year nearer getting out of it. Hopefully with wisdom, right? Ginevra was more of a woman, Donald more of a poet, Nicey as nice and much the same, and Gibbie, if possible, was more a foundling of the universe than ever, right? He was growing steadily and showed such freedom and ease, and his motions were all so rapid and direct that it was plain at a glance. The beauty of his countenance was in no manner or measure associated with weakness. The mountain was a grand nursery for him, right? Teaching him, just like this mountain is for us, right? We're on a mountain. I call it such. And the result, both physical and spiritual, corresponded. Janet, who better than anyone else knew what was in the mind of the boy, revered him as much as he revered her. The first impression he made upon her had never worn off, only changed its color a little. She thought it was like Jesus in the form of a child, because he came one time hungry to her, and the next time naked with the whip marks in a cross on his back because they had tortured him, thinking they were doing something good. Anyway, so more even than a knowledge of the truth is a readiness to receive it. And Janet saw from the first that Gibbie's ignorance at its worst was but room vacant for the truth. Because he had never spoken in his life. He can't speak, he's mute, if you didn't know that yet. When it came, it found bolt nor bar on door or window, but had immediate entrance. So he was just open for all the truth of the world, of God, of life, of love to come to him. Anyway, the secret of this power of reception was that to see a truth and to do it was one and the same thing with Gibbie. Once he knew something to be true, he did it. He lived in truth. To know and not to do would have seemed to him an impossibility, as it is in vital idea a monstrosity. So it is. It's a monstrosity to know the truth and not do it. This unity of vision and action was the main cause also of a certain daring simplicity in the exercise of the imagination, which, so far from misleading him, reacted only in obedience, which is the truth of the will, the truth, therefore, of the whole being. He did not do the less well for his sheep, that he fancied they knew when Jesus Christ was on the mountain, and always, at such times, both fed better and were more frolicsome. So he imagined Jesus as the good shepherd would come down and watch his sheep with him sometimes, that he just missed him, or he was just over the hill, or he had just been there, or he was there. Anyway, he thought Oscar knew it also, and interpreted a certain look of the dog by the supposition that he had caught a sign of the bodily presence of his Maker. The direction in which his imagination ran forward was always that in which his reason pointed. And so long as Gibbie's fancies were bud blooms upon his obedience, his imagination could not be otherwise than in harmony with his reason. Imagination is a poor root, but a worthy blossom. So he was rooted in the truth. If you're rooted in something else, then your imagination can take you, well, just God heal our imaginations. And in a nature like Gibbie's, its flowers cannot fail to be lovely, for no outcome of a man's nature is so like himself as his imaginations, except it be his fancies indeed. Perhaps his imaginations show what he is meant to be, his fancies what he is making of himself. There's a verse that says, write the vision and make it plain, but we're meant to also have our visions too. Anyway, in the summer, Mr. Galbraith, all unannounced, reappeared at Glashruach, but so changed that, startled at the sight of him, Ginevra stopped midway in her advance to greet him. The long, thin man was now haggard and worn. He looked sourer, too, and more suspicious, either that experience had made him so, or that he was less equal to the veiling of his feelings in dignified indifference. He was annoyed that his daughter should recognize an alteration in him, and turning away, leaned his head on the hand whose arm he was already supported by the mantelpiece, and took no further notice of her presence. But perhaps conscience also had something to do with this behavior. Ginevra knew from experience that the sight of tears would enrage him, and with all her might repressed those she felt beginning to rise, because he's just like ghosting her by his actions. She went up to him timidly and took the hand that hung by his side. He did not repel her, that is, he did not push her away, or even withdraw his hand, but he left it hanging lifeless, and returned with it no pressure upon hers, which was much worse. Is anything the matter, Papa? She asked with trembling voice. I am not aware that I have been in the habit of communicating with you on the subject of my affairs, he answered. nor am I likely to begin to do so, where my return, after so long an absence, seems to be given so little satisfaction. Oh, papa, I was frightened to see you looking so ill. Such a remark upon my personal appearance is but a poor recognition of my labors for your benefit. I venture to think, Jenny, he said. Anyway, I'm going to end there because, so this is chapter called The Reward. But I want to end on time today. Well, let me see. Oh, it's one more page until the end of the chapter. I think I'll finish. He was at that moment contemplating as a necessity the sale of every foot of the property her mother had brought him. Her mother, Jenny's mother, had that inheritance, and nothing less would serve to keep up his credit and gain time to disguise more than one failing scheme. See, it all was built on sand. Everything had of late been going so badly that he had lost a good deal of his confidence and self-satisfaction, but he had gained no humility instead. It had not dawned upon him yet that he was not unfortunate but unworthy. He was unworthy. The gain of such a conviction is to a man enough to outweigh infinitely any loss that even his unworthiness can have caused him, for it involves some perception of the worthiness of the truth and makes way for the utter consolation which the birth of that truth in himself will bring. And so, our humility will bring us to the truth of like God made us and died for us, but it's not trying to build up. He was trying to build up his own worth in his own eyes. Anyway, like egotism. As yet, Mr. Galbraith was but overwhelmed with care for a self, which so far as he had to do with the making of it, was of small value indeed, although in the possibility, which is the birthright of every creature, it was not less than that of the wretchedest of dog-licked Lazaruses, of a value by himself unsuspected and inappreciable. That he should behave so cruelly to his one child was not unnatural to that self with which he was so much occupied. Failure had weakened that command of behavior which so frequently gains the credit belonging only to justice and kindness, and a temper which never was good, but always feeling the chain, was ready at once to show its ugly teeth. He was a proud man whose pride was always catching cold from his heart. He might have lived 100 years in the same house with a child that was not his own, without feeling for her a single movement of affection. The servants found more change in him than Ginevra did. His relations with them, if not better conceived than his paternal ones, had been less evidently defective. Now he found fault with everyone, so that even Joseph dared hardly open his mouth, and said he must give warning. The day after his arrival, having spent the morning with Angus, walking over certain fields much desired, he knew of a neighbouring proprietor, inwardly calculating the utmost he could venture to ask for them with a chance of selling. He scolded Ginevra severely on his return because she had not had lunch, but had waited for him, whereas a little reflection might have shown him she dared not take it without him. Naturally, therefore, she could not now eat because of a certain sensation in her throat, after he was so mean to her. The instant he saw she was not eating, he ordered her out of the room. He would have no such airs in his family. By the end of the week, he arrived on the Tuesday. Such a sense of estrangement possessed Ginevra that she would turn on the stair and run up again if she heard her father's voice below. Her aversion to meeting him he became aware of, and felt relieved in regard to the wrong he was doing by his wife. He was doing his wife by reflecting upon her daughter's behavior towards him, for he had a strong constitutional sense of what was fair, and a conscience disobeyed became a cancer. Wow. Right? He had his own idea of justice based on his egotism, not on his real essence, his real self. In this evil mood, he received from someone all his life, Donald believed it was Fergus, a hint concerning the relations between his daughter and his tenant's herd boy. To describe his feelings at the bare fact that such a hint was possible would be more labor than the result would repay. What, his own flesh and blood, the heiress of Glashruach, derived pleasure from the boorish talk of such a companion? It could not be true. when the mere thought, without the belief of it, filled him with such indignation. He was overwhelmed with a righteous disgust. He did himself the justice of making himself certain before he took measures. But he never thought of doing them the justice of acquainting himself first with the nature of what, the intercourse, the dialogues that they had, that they held. But it mattered little, for he would have found nothing in that to give him satisfaction, even if the thing itself had not been outrageous. He watched and waited, and more than once pretended to go from home. At last, one morning, from the larchwood, he saw the unnatural girl seated with her maid on the bank of the river, the cowherd reading to them, and on the other side the dumb idiot lying listening. He was almost beside himself with what I can hardly define. In a loud voice of bare command, he called to her to come to him. With a glance of terror at Nicey, she rose, and they went up through the larches together. I will not spend my labor upon a reproduction of the verbal torrent of wrath, wounded dignity, disgust, and contempt with which the father assailed his shrinking, delicate, honest-minded woman-child. For Nicey, he dismissed her on the spot. Not another night would he endure her in the house, after her abominable breach of confidence, right, for introducing her to her brother, right, who's so... Anyway, she had to depart without even a goodbye from Ginevra, and went home weeping in great dread of what her mother would say. "Lassie," said Janet, when she heard her story, "don't you have anyone to blame but myself, for I'm the one that told you to bring the bonny, the bonny lassie, the bonny missy, right, the lovely lady, to go hear news from MacDonald, and I was just as wrong until, but folk of this world, they're the wrong kind of judge of things, and I must bethink myself that here. You can read this Scottish, anyway, of the serpent's wisdom, right? She could tell the spirit on this man. You learn, you get discernment, you can tell what spirit people are operating from. I have to learn from it. You're welcome home, my bonny lass. You can keep up the wee closet ready for the one who might come unexpected, They have a little bed. Nicey, however, had not long to occupy the closet, for those of her breed were in demand in the country. So she got a new job right away. Too bad for Ginevra. But chapter 32 is next, called the prologue. All right. So much love. Sorry we went over a little bit again. See you next time. Make sure to like and share and all that stuff. Thank you. Much love.